Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Before we begin the Hindu analysis for today, there are a couple of very important announcements. First of all, there's an extremely important workshop we are bringing for you live on the Byjus Exam Prep app on the 6th of August. This will be taken by none other than All India Rank 1 Miss Shruti Sharma. She will be interacting with all of you and sharing her journey that led her to become All India topper for the UPSC Civil Services Examination 2021. This workshop will be live only on Byjus Exam Prep app. It will not be on YouTube, so all that you have to do is make sure that you download the Byjus Exam Prep app and log in at 6 p.m. You also have to register beforehand for this workshop since the seats are limited. Make sure that you use the link given in the description of today's video to click on that and register for this workshop. Don't miss this because this can be very crucial for all of you. Second, this week's explained session that usually goes online, as you know, live on Friday on our YouTube channel at 8 p.m. will be on the topic ED. That is, we will be discussing what the Enforcement Directorate's recent raids. How is it that the Enforcement Directorate gets its powers? The recent Supreme Court judgment in this regard, so on and so forth. Now let's come back to the first big news of the day, which is not just a news in India, but a news that the entire world is discussing. That is Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Now, who is Nancy Pelosi? As you would know, Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, so similar to the Lok Sabha Speaker's position that we have here. Now, she is from the Democrat Party, the same party to which Joe Biden belongs. She has visited Taiwan, which has become a center of controversy for various reasons. China, of course, has been issuing multiple threats asking the US not to go ahead with this particular visit because China believes that Taiwan is an integral part of China. And by such a high profile visit, the US is actually giving a signal to the world that they believe in independence of Taiwan, which obviously Chinese do not like. Now, the interesting part is that there have been certain discussions within the Democrat Party itself in the US. For example, we even saw news reports under which the US President Joe Biden said that Nancy Pelosi should reconsider her visit. But even then, Nancy Pelosi went ahead and had this short term visit to Taiwan. It's not a long term visit, she has already left Taiwan after a very short meeting. However, it did not stop China from showcasing a very aggressive stand. You would have seen how China has undertaken multiple military exercises towards Taiwan. Multiple fighter jets of China have entered the airfield of Taiwan. All of that is not happening for the first time, but the timing of this actually raises a lot of questions and concerns about China and Taiwan. Now, I'm sure all of you are well aware of the geographical location. This is a Chinese mainland and this is a small island of Taiwan. Now, we will also discuss slight bit about the history and I'm sure all of you are already aware of it. China believes that Taiwan is a part of its own country. However, there is a separate government in Taiwan. In fact, Taiwan has often been regarded as one of the most advanced democracies throughout the world. That is, it has a proper democratic system where there are proper elections that are held, peaceful transfer of power. All these things which are never even seen or heard of in China, all these things actually happen in Taiwan. They have a very different kind of a political party system as compared to China. The Chinese Communist Party time and time again has reiterated that Taiwan is actually their part. It's a part of their country and they will ensure that it gets reunited with the mainland as soon as possible. Now, let's look at the history of China and Taiwan and how exactly were they separated. Now, in very simple terms, if you have to understand the history, if you have to go back to the beginning of the 20th century, when this entire area, China plus Taiwan, used to be ruled by one single dynasty called the Qing dynasty. Once the decline of the Qing dynasty started in 1912-1913, they were replaced by a political party called the Nationalist Party. So the Nationalist Party mainly was running entire China from 1912 to about 1948-49. In the 1940s, there was another party that came up in China called the Communist Party. The Communist Party led by leaders such as Mao Zedong. The Communist Party had a very different kind of ideology as compared to Nationalist Party. There was a full-fledged war between them, and the Nationalist Party lost that war. They had to leave China, and that is when in 1948-49 the Nationalist Party leaders escaped from this part and they settled themselves in Taiwan. Since then, Taiwan is ruled by a different government, while the Chinese part, that is the mainland, is ruled by the Communist Party of China. In fact, for many years after this division happened in 1949, there was a claim who will actually be considered as the real China. The government in Taiwan said that we are real China, while the government of mainland China said that we are the real China. And that demands exist even today. The ROC that you see written here is Republic of China. This is actually the official name of Taiwan. So they also use the word China here, just that they call themselves the Republic of China. On the other hand, the China mainland, the Chinese government as we call today, that is called the People's Republic of China. So when you say ROC, that is Republic of China, you mean to say Taiwan. Now, as I said, the fight between the Taiwan administration and the Chinese mainland is very, very old. Initially, after the Chinese Communist Revolution of 1949, most of the Western nations actually recognized the Republic of China, that is Taiwan only, as the real China. However, it was only in 1979 that they started to change their stand. In 1979, US and the People's Republic of China, that is today's China, started establishing their diplomatic relationship because US and other Western nations could not ignore that the real power actually lies in the Chinese mainland. And it is since then that the Taiwan government has not been very happy. Although what US has done on its part is that yes, they have established diplomatic relations with China, they have recognized the mainland China as the main country, but they have given kind of a security guarantee to Taiwan. So Taiwan right now is quite relieved because they get a lot of weapons, they get a lot of help from US, and they know that if China actually attacks them, the US will come for their help, unlike what happened in Ukraine. Now there is one more interesting fact that you need to understand here. Taiwan may be very small in size, but it is not a weak country at all. Let me give you a very simple comparison. We say that China is stronger than India, right? Why? Let's talk in terms of per capita income. If you look at the per capita income of India and then you see per capita income of China, you would realize that China's per capita income is about 5 times India, approximately. The per capita income that you see of a Chinese is 5 times that of Indian. Do you know about the per capita income of a Taiwan citizen? Anyone who is living in Taiwan, his or her per capita income is almost 5 times that of China. So while India's per capita income rounding off would be about $2,000, for China it would be about $10,000, for Taiwan it is upward of $50,000. So it's a very, very rich country. It's a proper democracy, always voted as some of the strongest democracies in the entire world. They have some of the latest weapons because they get a lot of help from the Western nations, including US, etc. So they are not any short of money. But obviously, when it comes to size, the size of China is much, much more overwhelming as compared to Taiwan. Now, China has always been following what you call as a one China policy or one China principle. Now, let's understand what exactly is this. Now, before we go deeper into this, just a quick clarification. Almost all the countries around the world, not just USA, India also, almost all the countries around the world except the one China principle. Almost all the countries believe yet that yes, there is only one China, there are not two different countries. Even India accepts that. So the Chinese government that we have follow the one China principle. In simple terms, there is only one Chinese country. Taiwan is a part of China only. Now what US has done is very interesting. Whenever the US government or whenever the US representatives talk on this issue or whenever they release an official statement, rather than saying one China principle, they actually say one China policy. Now, what is the difference between one China principle and one China policy? This is something that is regarded as an intentional ambiguity by US. Intentional ambiguity means intentionally the US government does not want to clarify its position. When China asks them question, they say, yes, we are supporters of one China policy. Why are you questioning us? Then when someone else asks the questions about the Taiwan position and their support to Taiwan, they say that yes, we follow our own one China policy and not principle. So what exactly is the difference between the two? It's not that easy to understand. The US has said that we follow the one China policy, meaning that the People's Republic of China is the only country that will be called China. We do recognize that there is no country such as Taiwan which has a separate sovereign status. At the same time, the US does not accept that China's sovereign control has to be over Taiwan. So while the US says that we understand Taiwan is not a separate country, but they also accept and reiterate the fact that China does not have the right to exert sovereign control over Taiwan. So this is their position, that is called a strategic ambiguity. That is not explaining its clear-cut position so that it can take advantage of both the sides, and it can explain and it can give an interpretation according to its own requirement whenever it requires. That is what their policy has been. As I said, India included is actually in support of the one China policy. We have never spoken up against it. So much so that we don't have any formal diplomatic contact with Taiwan as with many other nations. Just like many other nations, India has also made a kind of a loophole. How? India does have an office in Taiwan, that is Taipei, which is called the India Taipei Association. It's not an embassy, but it runs like an embassy only because it is headed by a senior diplomat from India. Taiwan, on the other hand, has something called the Taipei Economic and Cultural Center in New Delhi. Again, kind of like an embassy, a consulate only, but again, the official name has not been given here. India also, as you know, has not been having very great or warm relations with China in the past few years. And when that happens, intentionally, we also want to come even closer to Taiwan. So it is all a part of geopolitics. In simple terms, your enemy's enemy becomes your friend. That is what is happening with Taiwan with respect to US also and with respect to India as well. This short visit of Nancy Pelosi is already over. She is back. There are no immediate consequences, but what happens in the long run remains to be seen. The next article that we'll be taking up from the Hindu newspaper today is on demographic dividend. Now let me quickly tell you the theme of this article. The author here is saying that India right now is enjoying a demographic dividend. Now, when I say demographic dividend or India enjoying the demographic dividend, in very, very simple terms, what it really means to say is the number of people who are in the working age population in India, that is adult population, let's say from 16 to 64, who are able to work, their numbers are more than those who are dependent, that is old age people or children. Because think of it from the government's point of view. They don't get any taxes from the non-working population. So adults are the only ones who actually contribute to the country's economic progress. Demographic dividend is a situation when this working population is the highest while the dependent population is low, so that the country can actually progress very, very fast. India is in that stage. While the Western nation that you see or nations such as Japan, they are past their demographic dividend. Now, this is not to be surprised because every developed nation would have passed its demographic dividend. Demographic dividend passes when your average age increases. In nations such as Japan, the average age is now almost touching 50. And there's a simple reason for that. When you develop more as a country, there are two things that happen. Number one, your rate of reproduction reduces. And second, your death rate also reduces because you have much better medical facilities, so people don't die early and people are educated, they know how to actually plan their families, so the birth rate has also come down, because of which the average age in developed nations actually is very, very high. Remember when the pandemic first started and we were all so scared of why are the people dying in Italy in such large numbers even though they have great healthcare system? One of the reasons was that nations such as Italy had a very, very high average age as compared to young nations such as India. This is the same connection with demographic dividend. The author here is saying that in this race of development between India and China, India has a great advantage because of demographic dividend. The World Population Prospects 2022, that is a report of the UN, forecasts that the world's population will touch 8 billion this year and will rise to 9.8 billion by 2050. India is all set to surpass the Chinese population by 2023. The biggest reason for that is China's one child policy that all of you would be aware of. Because of this, China now is facing its own kind of issues. Because of the one child policy, the number of people in the working age in China is also declining, and the number of people who are dependent on government welfare schemes are actually increasing. Meaning that by 2050, China will have 500 million, that is 50 crore people who are above the age of 60. While by the same time, India's population would only have 33 crore people above the age of 60. So in India, the number of people who are dependent will be lower, the number of people who are earning will be higher. But the other part of the story is just because we have more people in the working age doesn't mean that they will essentially be working, doesn't mean that they will essentially be contributing to the country's economy. Because if that would have been the case, India would have been one of the most developed nations in the world, which is not the case right now. So just by having people in the right age doesn't really mean that it will work wonders. Why? Because it actually requires a lot of expenditure on the infrastructure, skills, training, etc., so that people can actually go ahead, work, and contribute to the taxes. The author seems to be optimistic. He says that in the coming decades, we will see expansion in the Indian industry because of focus on renewable energy. Also, there has been a lot of movement of supply chains. A lot of companies have been going out of China, not essentially coming into India only, but going to countries such as Vietnam, Bangladesh also. But India now also has been seeing an increased interest from other companies around the world. India's eminence in IT will remain just like what it is right now in the coming decades as well. So these are the good points, and this is how India can actually reap dividends from our demographic dividend. However, there are some concerns. As I said, even at the present situation, just because we have a young population doesn't really translate into India getting a lot of development because of lack of skilled workforce, lack of infrastructure, a lot of other things that are still not going in favor, because of which we need to invest a lot more in these factors. However, in the coming years, at least as compared to China, India seems to be placed in a better situation as per the author. For example, despite all these problems, in India, there is still scope for the people to come out, protest, hold rallies against the government, hold the government accountable, work as a pressure group, so on and so forth. Similar kind of things cannot be seen in China. China, in fact, has had a history of oppressing its own citizens continuously whenever they come out against the government, and we have seen this recently as well. See what is happening when people are protesting against the banks in China, when people are protesting against the Shanghai lockdown, the Hong Kong protest. These are all examples of the Chinese government oppressing its own people. This does not augur well for the nations in the long run. One other thing that we have not really realized is China has a huge development divide between rural and the urban population. The rural population of China is very, very backward, which people across the world don't really realize. Most of the income push of China is actually coming from the urban areas only. So much is the divide that many experts say that this divide in the coming decades will be almost impossible to fill. For India, on the other hand, the need is to invest much more in development of infrastructure, to invest much more in skill development, to invest much more in our education, provide high quality school and higher education as well as healthcare. Because if we don't invest in our healthcare, understand, doesn't matter how youthful the population is, a sick person cannot work. Doesn't matter what the age of the person is, 25, 45 or 85. That is why development in healthcare also needs to be a top priority for the government. Now, let me also share with you some interesting ideas apart from the article that is given here. This is the official definition of demographic dividend as given by the UN Population Fund. Also, if you look at nations across the world and see when is it that they were in a status of demographic dividend. Japan's demographic dividend got over in 2004, Italy in 2002. India, on the other hand, should be in the stage of demographic dividend till 2055. That is, till 2055, we can expect that the working age population of India should be higher than the non-working age population. So they should be the drivers of India's growth in the long run. Another interesting fact that I would like to share with you here is that yes, it is good to consider India's numbers overall, but the fact also remains that within India also there's a lot of diversity and disparity amongst the states. So the states such as UP, Bihar, etc., where the education level is lower, in those states you would say the demographic dividend is higher. Why? See, UP, Bihar, these kind of states that still have a very high reproduction rate. They still have very high population. Because of which these are the states in which you see that many more people are in the young working age. So there's a direct connection in India as we see between lack of education and higher population. Higher population then translates to better demographic dividend. But again, as I discussed, just having better demographic dividend, just having more young people doesn't essentially mean that they will be contributing to the country or the state's progress. So education also remains a very, very big factor in deciding whether a country will go ahead with a demographic dividend or not. This is also a good infographic for you to understand how India's demographic opportunity will change over the coming decades. Right now, 61% of India's population is working and the others are dependent. The situation will increase in 2031, will remain kind of same in 2051. After which in the coming decades we will see that this population, that is the burdened population, will actually increase and the population that is working will start to come down. But at least till the decade of 2051 to 2060, there is still time. So we should hurry up for that. The next article that we have here is written by the former president of Maldives. He is also the speaker of the People's Majlis in Maldives, that is Mohammad Nasheed. Now the article's topic says bring back the dhow route. Now what is dhow? Dhow actually were the old ships that were used by merchants. So if you have read in ancient and medieval history, you would have seen a lot of merchants coming into India from the Middle East, from the Roman areas also. These were ships that were actually used by merchants. That was called the dhow route. Now the article here actually is talking about multiple timelines. He's talking about Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean in the form of One Belt, One Road initiative. Then he also goes back to the ancient times of how Indian Ocean has always been at the center of attraction for merchants across the world. He says that China now has control of the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka because, as we all know, the Sri Lankan government was not able to repay the loan it had taken for development of Hambantota, as a result of which Hambantota became a Chinese territory for 99 years on lease. The reason why it is in the news is that the Chinese military vessel will be visiting the port of Hambantota, which India obviously does not really appreciate. China has been doing this with plans to expand its One Belt, One Road initiative. Now, in simple terms, One Belt, One Road initiative means China wants to connect directly to Europe through road also and through the waterways also and revive the old routes that it had actually developed. Now, to engage as many nations in this project as possible, China is using its money power. For example, China goes to Sri Lanka and says, "Hey Sri Lanka, do you need a port?" Sri Lanka obviously will say, "Yes, I need a port." China says, "Do you have money?" Sri Lanka says, "I don't have money." Then China will say, "Don't worry, I have the money. I will give you the money. You can pay back after many years. Don't worry. And even if you don't pay back, it's not that I can take the port back to my country, right? So you don't have to worry." And that is how countries such as Sri Lanka say yes, because they think the Chinese money is coming. That is how Pakistan said yes to CPEC. They thought the Chinese money will come, it will bring jobs, infrastructure, etc. But they forget the thing that when China comes in with their money, the jobs will not go to local people. Be it the Hambantota port, be it the CPEC. When China comes in to bring infrastructure in your country and spend their money, they actually also bring Chinese workers and Chinese companies. So most of the jobs to develop this infrastructure does not go to the local population of these countries. It actually goes to Chinese citizens only. So yes, the countries do get infrastructure. However, there is no change in the economic development of the country because the people don't get salary. This is the Chinese people only that are actually getting jobs for these projects. And that is why you have not seen any economic progress in any of these nations where China has actually invested. Coming back to this, the author says that the Indian Ocean has been at the center of attention for most of the merchants across the world for many, many centuries now. We saw how the Portuguese, Dutch, East India Company, all of them came here to develop their own port cities. Portuguese were the first one to actually display great boat building capacities and exploit the Indian Ocean ports, which were present in large numbers in India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, so on and so forth. Authors such as Ibn Battuta, who visited India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, etc., in his book The Rihla, talks about the travels that he did in Maldives and throughout the Indian Ocean trading ports. The current attempt by the Chinese to get control of the Indian Ocean is the same strategy that the merchants and these colonial powers had applied many, many years back. Because everyone knows that because this is the center of the most populous area in the world, this is an area where every country wants to have a good control. China, as I said, has been helping a lot of nations that have actually gone bankrupt or are about to go bankrupt by giving them a lot of money for infrastructure development, but it is mainly for the Chinese good only. This area has always had good ports because we have a history of trading between multiple parts of the world. China just has to revive that for its own development. The author says that rather than taking the help of China, the sovereign nations must understand that if they have to help their own people and their own development, they should revive their ports themselves. This is just an indication of how the One Belt One Road initiative will go ahead. As I said, China's ultimate aim is to connect to Europe by road also and through the waterways as well. Most of these ports that you see being built are actually sponsored by China on Chinese loans. Because the nations think that yes, China is actually giving us money, let's take it, and we'll see whenever we have to pay it back. Sri Lanka has done the same. We see Seychelles here, Djibouti, which has a huge Chinese military base, Gwadar port in Pakistan, so on and so forth. The interesting part here is it is not just that these small island nations in the Indian Ocean have actually accepted this offer. Even rich nations such as Italy, so rich that it is actually a part of the G7, they also had signed this agreement and they are also officially a part of the One Belt One Road initiative. This is way back in 2019. So don't assume that it is just the smaller, poorer nations that are accepting the Chinese offer. Even the bigger nations want the Chinese money coming in. They're pretty happy getting Chinese money for their development. China, in fact, says that close to 150 countries have signed the Belt and Road agreements with them. Doesn't mean that all of them have started the work, but they said that almost 150 countries have accepted it. Now, India obviously is not a part of it. China has given offer to India multiple times to be a part of it and have a port such as Mumbai be connected to it or Kolkata. But India has not taken up the offer so far because of obvious reasons that we don't trust the intention of the Chinese. China has been building this project for many, many years now. Especially the nations that are in debt have always been open to Chinese money coming into them, which has even made the situation worse for these nations. These are the main articles in the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number one, China's policy towards Taiwan and the US stand on the issue has increased tensions in the region. Examine the issue and discuss India's position on it. Second, India needs to invest in quality school and higher education as well as healthcare in order to reap its demographic dividend. Evaluate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a very, very good day ahead. And just a reminder, do register for the workshop by using the link given in the description of the video. Thank you so much.